So again, welcome everyone to our session on product selection and specifications. We are glad to see you here and thank you for sharing this half an hour of your day, whether this is your lunch break or it's 9 in the morning on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us. This session is being recorded and a link will be sent to everyone that registered. So if you need to jump off early to get to another meeting, we understand. And you'll have a link to the recording soon. I won't promise today, but tomorrow. Also, feel free to put comments in the chat, and Georgia and I will go through those after the presentation. So while we're waiting for a few more people to join, let's get started with our introductions. I'm Sherry Harbaugh, and I have been an independent specification consultant for the last 30 years. Most recently, I have turned my focus to educating the construction industry to help them become more familiar with specifications and helping product representatives communicate with architects and specifiers. I provide personal and executive coaching and also workshops around specifications and quality assurance. Georgia, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sherry. Hello, I'm Georgia Spencer, and I've been in the sales, advertising, and marketing business for the whole of my post-college career. Most recently, I was a product representative in the commercial flooring world. Now I'm an independent consultant focusing on training teams to put their best foot forward in the world of construction and specification sales.
I want to emphasize the title of expectations. Nothing is more important when you are preparing for a meeting than setting those clear expectations for all parties involved. It's critical to understand what your audience is expecting to hear so you can communicate with them successfully. What are your expectations when you visit with an architect or with a specifier? Have you ever gone into an office to do a presentation and be told, we don't have time, just leave your information at the door, and never get that meeting? It can be very disappointing. So many things get wound up in our expectations. So being clear in your expectations will help you walk out feeling like you know your next step. So today, Georgia and I are going to share some of our experiences from different perspectives on these items.
So today, our learning objectives are going to be threefold. First, we will address making sure you understand what the design team is looking for. Secondly, are you speaking the right language? Do you know how to translate your company's speak to your audience's language? And are you using jargon that's from your particular section of the industry, or are you communicating and understanding the specifier speak? And last but not least, when? What's the timeline and when to present what? What is expected of you, the manufacturer's rep, and when is it expected of you?
So let's get started on getting the right product in the right place. Georgia, why don't you start us off with your perspective on this?
So right product, right place. So very important. Do you know how the decision-making process works on this project and how this design team functions? And how can you assist the design team in selecting the right product for the right place? If you know that your product doesn't fit, don't propose it. Don't try to slam that proverbial round peg into a square hole. And once you know it fits, it's time to make sure you will set out to provide the pertinent information for the project. Also, make sure the information is current.
As a specifier, I understand it isn't that easy. As a product rep, you have very little to go on initially to know if your product will be used in the project or then if it's going to work. When you ask the designer for more information, they might get a little defensive or they just don't answer. And so I want you to know that I feel the same way from a specification point of view. When designers ask me to, add a product to the spec, such as, I don't know, metal roofing, right? I ask a few more questions and I don't hear back from them. Sometimes they need to be reminded that I asked it all. So don't be offended or think they don't want to hear from you. Sometimes they just don't know what to ask for or how to respond to you. It goes back to not knowing what you don't know. I'll ask a question and they simply haven't considered it. So they need time to figure it out in the complex world of decision making. It may be as simple as asking what the finish is on a fire extinguisher. There's so many factors that weigh into every decision.
Absolutely. And this is where your future reputation as a product rep can be put on the line. Don't provide a product that cannot live up to the situation. For example, an entryway system for a high traffic, high volume area in a higher education facility. This particular area preceded and protected a hard surface, long time high gloss flooring beyond the entryway. The product needed to be high performance due mostly to the high amount of abrasive content in the local soil. Plus, it needed to protect the flooring following. And there were height considerations due to doors, existing floors, and the specifier needed performance characteristics which would satisfy the criteria. This also, for the design team, had to be long-lasting and durable, plus it had to look nice as it was the gateway to the rest of the building and had high visibility and impact.
Compatibility is a catchphrase, and it seems to be in everything because, again, we just don't know what we don't know. We may select and specify an assembly or a system, but then one piece of it is no longer available, or a widget won't be available for 2 weeks, and that will hold up production. So I include this phrase in a lot of spec sections to ensure someone is looking out for compatible products. But let's take it a step further and consider the project requirements. Is the owner trying to achieve points to meet a rating system, such as LEED? So what does your product offer in the way of sustainability? Or how can your product be a solution for the owner?
That's right, Sherry. Solutions are often what people are looking for. So as a product rep, don't recommend something that won't last or won't do the job. This project probably isn't short-term and neither should your product be. But back to that entryway I was talking about. Functionality, durability, and compatibility with the environment were all areas to be considered in the product selection. Make it easy for the design team by providing choices. Select that best option, the one that should be put in, and perhaps then followed up with a better option for a fallback, and as a last resort, value-wise, a good option. Good, better, and best. Which one will speak to performance, life cycle, and cost? And back to compatibility and our entryway, will the existing doors clear? Does it match up to the existing hard surfaces? How easy will it be to go into the situation? Does it match the wall color? Or did I mention this was in an existing building? Make sure it fits. And then back to durability. How long will it last? How long should it last? Will the project be one that might be retrofitted in a short period of time or be there for 25 years? How easy is it to maintain? Is sustainability a criteria, and to what level? And again, this is where it is key to know what the design team expectations are. You don't need to sell them a Volvo when a scooter bike will do, and don't sell them a scooter bike when a well-built, well-engineered Volvo is needed.
So recommending the right product for the right situation is great, but let's talk about your audience. As we just discussed, oftentimes the design team doesn't know what is needed to put the spec together. This is an area that you as a product representative can be proactive. While designers may select your product for a number of reasons, they don't often realize the number of decisions that need to be made for the contractor to order and install your product. So as a product expert, you can help the team by offering information you know they will eventually be asking for. Unless you've worked with someone before, don't assume the person you are speaking with knows what is needed to correctly incorporate your product into the project. In fact, you may find that while designers are thinking in 3D to develop the drawings, they may overlook those last-minute details or decisions that aren't shown on the drawings. For example, I was working with an architect, and this detail on the slide is what they included on the drawings. So I asked, it just says stone, right? So what kind of stone? So I asked, what's the stone? And I was sent a manufacturer's name and finish. I did start communicating with the manufacturer. Still didn't find out what the stone was. Is it limestone? Is it granite? Is it marble? There's a lot of different stones out there. So I couldn't even, based on the detail that they sent, I couldn't exactly figure out. I was guessing on the thickness. I was guessing on the setting method. I wasn't sure how it was attached. I was asking the architect these questions. They had no idea. This detail is all they had on their drawings, and this is what they issued in the bid set. So I made an educated guess in the spec, and it got sent out for bid. And then about a week later, I received a long trail of emails from the manufacturer with information that really wasn't relevant to the type or thickness of the stone. I never found out what type of stone it was. I found out the thickness, and they said the setting method that I chose was fine. But instead, this email had asked if I needed to know the geological information or the hardness of the stone. And that's pretty impressive and sounds pretty technical. You would think that a specifier would need that information, but I didn't, right? Because the architect already selected the stone. I didn't have a choice in it. So I wasn't making the design decision on the stone for performance or durability. I was trying to document the decision the architect had made and trying to make sure it could be installed without failure. So my point being is that this all happened a full week after the project was on the street for bid. So the manufacturer of the stone could have issued a cut sheet of the stone and some installation parameters, or asked, where on the project is this going to be installed, so that they could give the designer some installation details and pass those on to the specifier.
So as Sherry said, it wasn't a design decision. She needed to specify it. And so whether you call them guide specs or specifications, in order for them to be put into a bidding document, they need 3 parts. Part 1, the general. Part 2, products. Part 3, execution. And this is an area where you can help in the development and the review of the specification for your product. So Sherry, can you put this in a language even a product rep can understand?
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's start with part 1 of a 3-part spec. So this is where you will include what the submittal requirements are, if there's a mock-up required for the job. And please, when you're talking about sample sizes, mark it up. Don't let me include something that you're going to upcharge to the project because it's a custom sample. Review all of part 1 and make sure it reflects the project and your project, your product needs. Does your material or product require installation by a certified installer, for example? So this is where you would include that information. In part 2, products, this is where you are going to include your product description, include materials, any components that are required for installing it, finishing of the product, fabrication. That all goes here in part 2. And speaking of fabrication, I'm sometimes asked if I include fabricators in the spec. My answer is it depends, right? I do include fabricators for metal wall panels. I don't want a sheet of metal showing up on the site without parameters or what to do with it. If the material is part of an assembly or a system that requires a fabrication specific method, yes, I definitely include the fabricator in the spec. I do want to caution in part 2 of the manufacturer specs that I have reviewed, nearly 80% of them, I see this paragraph that says no substitutions allowed, and that it just isn't realistic. Particularly if you're asked to review a spec for an architect, I strongly suggest you find out if that is acceptable for the project type. If it's a public bid project, that's a no-go. And don't leave it in, assuming that the architect or engineer or specifier will take it out if they see it, because chances are they won't read it. If they asked you for input, they trust that you read it and have included the clauses to defend their decisions, not to put them in an uncomfortable position. And in part 3, as the manufacturer, do you have someone that will be on site during installation and write up a report? That's where you would include it in part 3. Are there special installation requirements for your product, or other materials that need to be in place prior to yours? So execution is the place for that. Part 3 execution is where you're going to include that information. And you may be wondering why we felt this particular topic was of importance. And that's because too often I ask a manufacturer for specs, and this is what I get. I get data sheets or technical sheets instead of actual 3-part specifications. So I'm going to send this over to Georgia to talk about data sheets and 3-part specs in a little bit more detail.
You bet, Sherry. So data sheets are just that. They're also, we often call them in the trade, product sheets, cut sheets. They're information sheets. They provide a lot of data, and it's usually in the performance arena, including testing. They might include color selections, ASTM standards they've met. But what about the nuts and bolts? Data sheets may show a lot of test results, performance characteristics, but they don't include pertinent information needed to specify the product, such as regulatory or quality control requirements, storage needs, or even how to install. That information is always provided in a 3-part specification. So now that we've kind of addressed the basics, let's move to the when. Let's evaluate the optimal timing to engage the project team to ensure proactive communication and alignment with project requirements. Let's ask those questions. When do you do what, and for whom? So we're going to briefly discuss these phases so you understand the types of decisions that are being made along the timeline, so you as a product rep know what the design team might be looking for.
So everyone says they want to be invited to the table early in the design, but how early is too early? We're going to look at what's happening in each phase of design and construction. Schematic design. During this design phase, the architect engineer is reviewing the owner's program, budget requirements. There may be preliminary sketches, plans, and elevations, and other graphics to illustrate the program. There may also likely be a narrative that is issued that describes in words the design concepts that the architect is hoping to achieve. Personally, as a spec writer, in my role as an independent spec writer anyway, I'm rarely involved in this phase. In fact, I'm likely not even brought on to the project yet. I may not even know it exists yet at schematic design.
However, product reps have an involvement at this stage, but it may be limited to general conversation about product availability and probability, and how is it going to be used on the project type. And the best way to get to the table at this stage, sadly, is a previous relationship. Or the other option is, this a good place to develop relationships? Product reps will be expected to make an introduction to products, give a nice overview of key benefits, possible applications. They can help the design team to get to know their products and get to know yourself. This might be where you will have your initial contact and discuss the project and desires of the design team, and you can provide basic product literature. Also, introduce sustainability information and make sure it's current.
Right. So design development, depending on the delivery method, design development moves the project from programming and functions to more technical issues of constructability and that integration of systems and components. Now, I know that it sounds like a lot. Essentially, During design development, the design team is settling up on the design and finalizing the size and character. There you go, the size and character of the project. So that will, then they can describe in more detail the materials and systems and how they relate to each other. In negotiated contracts, for example, this can be a critical point of getting pricing. For this delivery method, I have in the past issued GMP sets, pricing sets, as the final submittal of the design development phase.
Exactly. And here you as a product rep will introduce detailed product information. This is when you bring in your tech data, your performance data, your installation guides, your 3-part specs, maybe even samples and mock-ups, and possibly warranties. But know what and to whom. Be ready to provide tech support for specific details and questions which might arise about performance, compatibility, installation, durability. And finally, make sure you have all of your code compliance ducks in a row and that this information is up to date. And what I mean by compliance is fire ratings, certifications, and any other regulatory requirements your products need to meet and do meet.
So finally, to construction documents. So this is the point most of us are familiar with, but I hope you see now that there are many months of decision making and opportunities for decision changing of minds before we start to get into the weeds here with construction documents. This is where we see final-ish decisions incorporated into the design as construction details. And this is where the product rep can show their expertise on their product and really help the design professional incorporate the components and systems correctly, both in the drawings and in the specs. This is also when you are most likely to hear from your favorite spec writer asking for a recommendation on one of those products that we need, but may not be a design decision. Most recently, I was asked to add a floor coating in a mechanical room that was over occupied space. The designer didn't care what it was as long as it met the performance requirements. So I called one of my trusted advisors and I asked for a recommendation. And I give you this example to share more background into the designer's mind. There are products that don't take precedence in the design world, but are still necessary nonetheless. So you know where your product is used and when it's most appropriate for its use.
And as Sherry mentioned earlier, this is where you can show your expertise and shine. Know your product. For you, the product rep, have your 3-part CSI specification available and make sure your specification has been edited for any specific needs of the projects like we discussed earlier. May also be asked for BIM and CAD files at this time, and perhaps a technical presentation or two. And finally, make sure your code compliance is put together and up to date. So really, you need to know where you are in the timeline to make sure you're providing the right information and maybe not too much information or not enough information until the time is right. Again, your relationships you have or are developing are the magic key to open these doors. So moving on to after it's gone out to bid, regarding substitutions after the construction documents have been completed. So your product isn't on the blueprints. Too late. Don't do it. You should be there before. However, in some instances, you may do this to meet a delivery deadline, replace a dropped product, or you might be asked to even replace a dropped color or finish or style. Or the most hated word of all, value engineering.
As a specifier, I don't take a huge exception to receiving substitution requests. I see them as opportunities to learn about a new product. However, I would rather learn about a new product before it goes out to bid. The design team in particular does not like substitutions because they're designing around a particular module. For instance, I had a designer I was working with recently tell me that they would literally take the size of the metal panel and base their door and window opening locations around those panel sizes. But once they found the panel they liked, that was it. You know, for them to accept a substitution on that would have been a major redesign. Under building trust and credibility, in another instance, I was working on a university project that required a fire separation door. The architect had designed the wall thickness and openings around that particular door. So once under construction, the construction team had accepted a substitution, obviously not coordinating with the design team, but the head of the fire door was larger than the other one, and the wall needed to be rebuilt to accommodate this new accepted door. So consider your product and where it fits in with the design concept and its effect on other building components. Be sure that you as a manufacturer have looked at the drawings and are aware of the conditions. As Georgia mentioned up front, retain your credibility by recommending the right product for the right project. Instead of asking for a substitution, would it be better to send the product information to the design team asking for their consideration on the next project? And ask for an audience to share what your product can offer.
Exactly, Sherry. Building trust takes time, and a single project can take several years from design through construction. That is a lot of time to work on a relationship, not only for this current project, but for the next one and the next, and hopefully thereafter.
Coaching Corner. As I mentioned in my introduction, I am a certified personal and executive coach. So this is my opportunity to put on my coaching hat. We recently passed the 6-month mark of 2024. So half of the year has zipped by in a flash. So I'd like you to take some time this afternoon, maybe after this presentation or later this week, and evaluate those 6 months. What went well for you the first half of the year? What did you learn that you will use over the next 6 months as we look at wrapping up 2024? Is there something you need to change? Something you want to add, maybe? And finally, what's your implementation plan? What is your plan forward? I encourage you to take some time and think about these. And if you want an accountability buddy, drop me a note with your discoveries and goals. I would love to be your buddy there. Or let's schedule some time together and we can talk about it. You can contact me through my website too. Finally, this leads me to our final slide, encouraging you to continue gaining knowledge and getting the training you need to excel. I would like to share this upcoming event I will be doing with Casey Robb on August 22nd. There, he just turned his camera on. Hi, Casey. Sure. Casey has over 4 decades of experience, specifically in architectural promotion, commercial market strategy, and specification influence. He and I will talk about expectations around building strong relationships that lead to real connections that will make you a better product representative. Mark your calendars, and I hope you can join us for that conversation. Georgia, do you want to add something here about ongoing training opportunities and CDTs, CSI?
Absolutely. And first off, I'm going to be joining that conversation you're having with Casey because he is one of my favorite people out there. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about CSI, which is Construction Specifications Institute, and their certification program for the CDT, the Construction Documents Technologist. It provides, just like they say in their ad, it's a comprehensive program of study for anyone seeking to enhance and demonstrate knowledge of writing, interpreting, enforcing, and managing construction documents. It's a good overall view of our industry. You can contact myself, Sherry, or your local chapter of CSI to find out more information. And yes, after the many years I spent in a variety of sales, marketing, and advertising roles, feel free to think of me as your in-country outsourcing sales training assistant. I can help you build a map to get you where you want to go. And if you're looking for additional training tools, Oh, Sherry,
Oh,
I
that's
stepped on
mine.
yours.
Come to my website. If this is the first time that you've heard words such as three-part specs, please visit my website, specseducation.online. I will include this link in the chat for you, but I cover topics like that in several of my free online videos. Check out industry standards where I talk about three-part specs, section format, master format. They're only 3 to 5 minutes and they can answer some questions pretty quick, or they might bring up additional questions as well. Any final comments, Georgia?
Nope, I think that's good. I've viewed your short time videos there, and I agree, they're excellent sources. So
Great.
resources, take advantage of them.
Great. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have some takeaways from today around that. I hope we met your expectations actually, and you have some great takeaways from our conversation today. You have a deeper understanding about timing, introducing products, and what a specifier needs. Casey, do you want to say anything about your upcoming program in August?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for having us today because you and Georgia knocked it out of the park. Very succinct, very organized, and very focused on how you delivered it. I was absolutely impressed. And I, as well, cannot say enough about CDT. It's basically the rules of engagement for construction document process. And I took it way back in 1989. And if I'd have had it a few years before that in college, I probably would have been a danger to society. But it really taught me a lot. And as a product rep, it was just genuinely helpful to everything I did. So I encourage everyone to take that CDT, and it'll get you through a lot more of these things. But great job. The upcoming seminars, we're going to focus on the ARC rep relationship and making those connections count. And every day we face tougher and tougher challenges with time is money, getting people to respond, getting our message across. How do we bridge that gap? How do we make those bridges? How do we create those connections? And how do we make them a long-term business case that helps us both be more successful? That's what I've taken a lot of pride and value in my career. And I think this platform gives us the opportunity to do that. So I'll wrap it up with that. And thank you again for doing a great job today.
Great. Thanks, Casey. I'm going to stop the recording now, but please stay online. If you have questions, we'll visit the chat and we'll carry on this conversation.